What's up, everybody? Found a killer book here. This was published in 1887, Ragnarok, The Age of Fire and Gravel. And this is just some good old school catastrophism. He goes through the geological evidence for this and the old legends. And the fact that this book exists basically says academia willfully looked the other way when they went with the uniformitarianism concept. That's where all of these geological processes take millions and millions of years, and it's insanely complicated. You can't understand it. But trust us, this all took millions of years. He basically blows that out of the water in the first chapter with what he's calling the drift. I've talked about this before. It was right around the last time I had to dig a big hole. But I've dug quite a few of them across America, and you see more or less the same thing everywhere. You have 4 to 6 inches in most places of topsoil. If you're down in a valley, you might have a foot and a half of it. Then below that is just clay and rocks and all lifeless materials. And it's always kind of tripped me out because you're looking at the sum total of life on Earth, at least this go around. And really, when you only see 4 to 6 inches, I don't think that would take too long to build that up. But everything below that is just clay and rock, inorganic, lifeless material. So he's calling that lifeless layer the drift and says it varies in thickness from place to place, but that they have found life below that. Also, he says that this drift only occurs here in the shaded area. So in some places there, you got 10 foot of drift, some places 100 foot. We'll talk a little bit about the geology and then we'll get into the legends, remembering this. He's a little bit long winded at times, so we'll be skipping through. What do we dwell on? The Earth. What part of the Earth? The latest formations, of course. We live upon the top of a mighty series of stratified rocks laid down in the water of ancient seas and lakes during incalculable ages, said by geologists to be from 10 to 20 miles in thickness. Pretty sure he's referring to the crust. Think of that. Rock piled over rock from the primeval granite upward to a height 4 times greater than our highest mountains, and every rock stratified like the leaves of a book, and every leaf containing the records of an intensely interesting history. Upon the top of that last of this series of stratified rocks, we find the drift. What is it? Go out with me where yonder men are digging a well. Let us observe the material they are casting out. First, they penetrate through a few inches or a foot or two of surface soil. Then they enter a vast deposit of sand, gravel, and clay. It may be 50, 100, 500, 800 feet before they reach the stratified rocks on which this drift rests. It covers whole continents. It is our Earth. It makes the basis of our soils, yada yada. Skipping forward a little bit, in the first place, it is mainly unstratified. Its lower formation is altogether so. There may be clearly defined strata here and there in it, but they are such as a tempest might make, working in a dust heap, picking up a patch here and laying it upon another there. But there are no continuous layers reaching over any large extent of the country. Sometimes the material has been subsequently worked over by rivers and been distributed over limited areas in strata, as in and around the beds of streams. But in the older and first laid down portion of the drift, called in Scotland the till and in other countries the hardpan, there is a total absence of stratification. Okay, we'll use a cutaway of the Grand Canyon to look at this. Let's say this layer right here is the drift. It's anywhere from 50 to 800 feet thick, and it's not stratified, which means it was deposited all at once. If it had built up layer on top of layer over time, you would see the stratification of that, but that is absent. So what deposits 800 feet of detritus all at once? Well, something big. And that's all sitting on top of a layer that they're calling the till or the hardpan. Geikie says, in describing the till, I remarked that the irregular manner in which the stones were scattered through that deposit imparted to it a confused and tumultuous appearance. The clay does not arrange itself in layers or beds, but is distinctly unstratified. The material consisted of earth, gravel, and stones, and also in some places broken trunks or branches of trees. While several different origins have been assigned for the phenomena known as the drift, and while one or two of these have been widely accepted and taught in our schools as established truths, I don't think so. Basically, what he says, in a more scholarly kind of way. No such hypothesis is sufficient to explain either the cataclysms or the glacial phenomena, and we need not hesitate to confess our ignorance of this strange, this mysterious episode in the history of our globe. Nevertheless, we repeat, no explanation presents itself which can be considered conclusive, and in science, we should never be afraid to say, I do not know. Hey, you had some honest scientists back in the day. So he goes on for about 4 more chapters on the drift. He's just explaining mud flood. He was just 150 years ahead of all of us, and he called it the drift, which means, had things gone another way, we would have all been taught mud flood in school. Only hopefully by a much better name. I never liked that name. So we're skipping way ahead to the Legends and Myths chapter. An universal myth points to 2 conclusions. First, that it is based on some fact. Secondly, that it dates back, in all probability, to the time when our ancestors of the races possessing it had not yet separated. Man had spread widely over the earth before the drift. Therefore, he had lived long on the earth. His remains have been found in Scotland, England, Ireland, France, Spain, Italy, Greece, Africa, Palestine, and India, and in the United States. Man was living in the valley of the lower Thames before the Arctic mammalia had taken full possession of the valley of the Thames and before the big-nosed rhinoceros had become extinct. So the Thames is a river in England, and I guess he's implying that rhinoceros lived there at one time. I watched some of those the other day, and wow, those are just some crazy prehistoric armored knights. Mr. Titteman writes that among a number of bones obtained during the exploration of the Victoria Cave near Settle, Yorkshire, there's one which Mr. Busk has identified as human. Mr. Busk says, the deposit from which the bone was obtained is overlaid by a bed of stiff glacial clay containing ice-scratched boulders. Here, then, says Geikie, is direct proof that men lived in England prior to the last interglacial period. The evidences are numerous, as I have shown, that when these deposits came upon the earth, the face of the land was above the sea and occupied by plants and animals, especially at the lower part. The bones of mammoth, wild bull, deer, horse, rhinoceros, and the reindeer are found near the bottom of these strata, mixed with the flint implements of men. Remember that the drift is unfossiliferous and unstratified, that it fell en masse, and that these remains are found in its lower part or caught between it and the rocks below it. And you can form a visual picture of the sudden and terrible catastrophe. Probably perished, ground up in the tempest, while only their flint implements and the great bones of the larger animals, hard as stones, remain to tell the dreadful story. So, according to official science, man didn't even exist before the last interglacial period, let alone 800 feet of mud getting deposited somewhere. But he's saying that below that, we clearly have the bones of all the animals, men, and flint tools. We turn now to the legends of mankind. I shall try to divide them so as to represent in their order the several stages of the great event. And first, I shall present 1 or 2 legends that most clearly represent the first coming of the monster, the dragon, the serpent, the wolf, the dog, the evil one, the comet. The second Hindu avatar gives the following description of the rapid advance of some dreadful object out of space and its tremendous fall upon the earth. By the power of God, there issued from the essence of Brahma a being shaped like a boar, white and exceedingly small. This being, in the space of an hour, grew to the size of an elephant of the largest size and remained in the air. That is to say, it was an atmospheric, not a terrestrial creature. Brahma was astonished on beholding this figure and discovered by the force of internal penetration that it could be nothing but the power of the omnipotent, which had assumed a body and become visible. He now felt that God is all in all, and all is from him, and all in him, and said to Marichi and his sons, the attendant genii, "A wonderful animal has emanated from my essence. At first, of the smallest size, it has in 1 hour increased to this enormous bulk, and without doubt, it is a portion of the almighty power." Brahma, an earthly king, was at first frightened by the terrible spectacle in the air, and then claimed that he had produced it himself. They were engaged in this conversation when that Vara, or boar form, suddenly uttered a sound like the loudest thunder, and the echo reverberated and shook all the quarters of the universe. This is the same terrible noise which, as I have already shown, we skipped over that part. I'll probably do another video on that. Would necessarily result from a carbureted hydrogen of the comet exploding in our atmosphere. The legend continues. But still, under this dreadful awe of heaven, a certain wonderful divine confidence secretly animated the hearts of Brahma, Marachi, and the other genii, who immediately began praising and thanksgiving. That Vera, boar form figure, hearing the power of the Vedas and mantras from their mouths, again made a loud noise and became a dreadful spectacle, shaking the full flowing mane which hung down his neck on both sides, and erecting the humid hairs of his body. He proudly displays his two most exceedingly white tusks, then rolling about his wine-colored red eyes and erecting his tail, he descended from the region of the air and plunged head foremost into the water. The whole body of water was convulsed by the motion and began to rise in waves, while the guardian spirit of the sea, being terrified, began to tremble for his domain and cry for mercy. Now, I'm pretty sure it was Cassidorius that described the same thing in the 536 AD event. It was something that started out very small up in the sky, quickly grew larger and larger, and then he talks about all the treetops being on fire and crazy electrical storms, howling winds. So if you're facing this thing, you can see it clearly, it's coming in fast. And you think about like Göbekli Tepe, they say that they intentionally buried that city. So that would imply that they not only saw it coming, but they knew what it was, and they knew that, hey, if we're going to have anything left here, let's just bury our city in sand and we'll go up on a high mountain and hope we make it. According to that Brahma story, it hit the water, which is probably a worst case scenario. You'd probably be better off if it did hit land. Because if it hits the water, which is most likely, Earth is 75% water, it's going to send a mile-high wave of water everywhere. How fully does this legend accord with the descriptions of comets given by astronomers, the horrid hair, the mane, the animal-like head? Lockyer's account of Coggia's comet, as seen through Newell's large refracting telescope at Ferrandy, and which he described as having a head like a fan-shaped projection of light with ear-like appendages at each side, which sympathetically complemented each other at every change, either of form or luminosity. Now we turn to the legends of another race. The Zendavesta of the ancient Persians describes a period of great innocence and happiness on earth. This represents, doubtless, the delightful climate of the tertiary period already referred to when endless summer extended to the poles. Now, I'll have to look into what he's got to say about that because it sounds a lot like the Saturn is our first sun golden age era. There was a man bull who resided on an elevated region which the deity had assigned him. Is that like the Minotaur, the man bull? This was probably a line of kings or a nation whose symbol was the bull, as we see in Baal or Baal, with the bull's horns dwelling in some elevated mountainous region. At last, an evil one, denominated Ahriman, corrupted the world. After having dared to visit heaven, that is, he appeared first in the high heavens, he descended upon the earth and assumed the form of a serpent. That is to say, a serpent like comet struck the earth. The man bull was poisoned by his venom and died in consequence of it. Meanwhile, Ahriman threw the whole universe into confusion, chaos, for that enemy of good mingled himself with everything, appeared everywhere, and sought to do mischief above and below. We shall find all through these legends allusions to the poisonous and deadly gases brought to the earth by the comet. We've already seen that the gases which are proved to be associated with comets are fatal to life. Now, I've talked about that several times before, especially with the Black D. They all say the air was corrupted. They used, different language, but basically we're saying that the air was poisonous. It's sometimes they would say somebody would take a breath of it and then like instantly be gone. And I've kind of debated the possibilities on that. That could be from the great chasms that opened up in the earth and noxious fumes could have came up, or it all came down from the sky. He's implying the latter here. And this, be it remembered, is not guesswork, but the revelation of the spectroscope. Like I said, we skipped over a lot, but apparently in there he actually measured some of this noxious gas. The traditions of the ancient Britons tell us of an ancient time when the profligacy of mankind, had to look that one up, it's reckless extravagance of mankind, had provoked the great supreme to send a pestilential wind upon the earth. A pure poison descended, every blast was death. And this time the patriarch, distinguished for his integrity, was shut up, together with his select company, in the enclosure with the strong door, the cave, ? Here the just ones were safe from inquiry. Presently a tempest of fire arose. It split the earth asunder to the great deep. The lake Leon burst its bounds, and the waves of the sea lifted themselves on high around the borders of Britain. The rain poured down from heaven, and the waters covered the earth. That one sounds kind of familiar, doesn't it? Here we have the whole story told briefly, but with the regular sequence of events. 1. The poisonous gases. 2. The people seek shelter in the caves. 3. The earth takes fire. 4. The earth is cleft open, the fjords are made, and the trap rocks burst forth. 5. The rain pours down. 6. There is a season of floods. So I don't know if you guys have sat down and thought about what it would be like if Mount Everest fell from the sky. Something of significant size coming in at thousands of miles an hour. But let's go through a little bit of it. Say you were directly underneath it. It's coming straight at you. Well, if it was big enough, you would probably fry before it ever made contact. They say the temperatures just from the friction would be 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, and which is why I think most of them airburst instead of actually making contact. But then let's say you're 100 miles away from the bullseye. Well, you're going to watch this thing get brighter than the sun. It's probably going to leave you blind if you're sitting there staring at it. But if you're not blind afterwards, just remember the speed of sound is a lot slower than the speed of light. So when that sonic boom gets to you, then you're going to be deaf. And you can actually see the shockwave going through the atmosphere. I've seen one off of a volcanic eruption. And the mosaics at Ravana show that that's what they saw during the 536 AD event. I mean, that's a very clear shockwave that they have painted there with the hand of God in the middle of it. And the artist kind of hid all of these Easter eggs in the murals they did there, or the mosaics. Now, superheating the atmosphere there in that place is going to create a big high pressure system that's going to collapse. So then you have 1,000-mile-an-hour winds sucking in to fill that void. And evidently it brings down a whole bunch of that super cold higher atmosphere air, which is why you get like the Siberian mammoth that's flash frozen, still got buttercups in its mouth. Like he shows in his map here, There's areas that the drift is, a couple 100 feet thick, but like Siberia, there's nothing there. It just froze everything instantly. There'd also be crazy electrical flashes going off from everything I've heard. Then, when it made impact, that could be enough to literally break one of the tectonic plates loose and make the whole plate shift. So, say it hit the South American plate, moving towards our left, the right side would shift and open up, while the left side would be hitting the Nazca plate, probably uplifting. And, it could set off a chain reaction of quakes all around the world. But most likely, it's going to hit water. It's going to be in several pieces. So then you got mile high tsunamis going everywhere. It would fill the atmosphere with dust and debris, most likely causing a volcanic winter, quote unquote, volcanic winter, which I've read you guys a Harvard paper on how the 536 AD event was most likely a comet airburst. That too is recorded in the Ravana mosaics. That blue sun was what the sun looked like for 18 months. Its light would just barely make it through in this blue haze. So even if you lived on the other side of the world from where this thing hit, it's still going to have an effect on you. It's changing climate patterns. In some cases, there's a layer of ash covering everything. Oh, and you might get some poison gases flowing your way. So it'd be a pretty gnarly ordeal. Possibly the lucky ones were the ones that were directly under it and at least went quickly and didn't have to go through a slow, agonizing famine. And modern science would lead you to believe that this is only, this kind of thing only happened hundreds of millions of years ago. Otherwise, it's science fiction. But no, it's happened several times in human history, and they've passed down the legends of this for generations. So I'll definitely be reading more of this book, and I come across anything good, I'll get it out for you guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Static out.